All right. So there you go. Yes, that's nice. That's nice. Okay. All right.
Yay! We finally got started, guys.
Exactly 1 year ago, my friend Ashley, you've seen her in my episode on transforming your clients into models, she reached out to me to photograph her birthday shoot, which had a garden-inspired theme. So after a year of sitting on this footage, I figured why not release it and share with you my step-by-step guide to creating depth in your photos. Hey everyone, I go by VLauren on social media, but you can call me Victoria, and welcome to episode 4 of Still Good. Anytime I'm slated to do a portrait shoot, I always ask if there's a Pinterest board to get a better idea of what the desired look is. When Ashley sent me this board, I was stoked because I love floral shoots and I was really excited to see how this vision was going to come together. And this vision wouldn't have come together if it wasn't for Evelyn, who is the founder of Joy Forever Events, and she helped to create and arrange the set design for this shoot. So let's talk set design and how it affects depth in your photos. Your set is not only crucial to the vision, but it also helps in creating depth. The set for any photo shoot is the total visual environment that your camera sees, whether in studio or on location, because your set incorporates creating physical, visual, and lighting layers. By placing set pieces/elements at varying distances from the camera, you can manipulate a 3-dimensional space within a 2-dimensional frame. Set design can be as easy or as complicated as you make it. But what's important to understand about your set is its relationship to your camera. So one of the first things that I did on set was take a picture of the set as it was with my phone. I asked Ashley to sit in the center and snap the shot to figure out how much space I would be working with. The placement of these set pieces were carefully thought out to create a visual that Ashley was blooming in a garden. We had potted plants that Evelyn would decorate with flowers to fill the negative/empty spaces and provide a sense of fullness. The placement of the set pieces not only helped to achieve the vision, but created the perception of depth. Again, your set can be as simple or complex as you desire, but what's important to understand about it is that placing your set pieces at varying distances from your camera creates layers. These layers are background, midground, and foreground. So it's important that each set piece is at the appropriate distance from your camera. The background is the farthest layer and distance from your camera. In the studio, this would be your backdrop, or if you're shooting indoors, it could be a wall, or even if you're shooting on location, it can be a natural or environmental landscape. So in our background layer, we had a yellow backdrop and placed potted plants there. The midground is the mid-range layer and distance from your camera. It is the layer where you position your subject. We initially had Ashley sitting on the floor, then moved to have her sit on a stool, then back to the floor again, which was all done in the midground layer. The foreground is the closest layer in distance to your camera, and this is the layer where you place an object to act as a visual anchor to guide the viewer's eye. So in our foreground layer, we had 2 potted plants, and Evelyn draped a floral bridge across. Thanks to her placement of our set pieces, we were able to build a set that had natural depth. Since your set is a total visual environment that your camera sees, lighting is important, because lighting can add or subtract to the depth that you've already built into your scene. We had 2 lights set up, and I had an on-camera flash that would serve as my fill light. I ended up not using my flash because I wanted to keep the shadows as well as maintain the high contrast. And the purpose of creating contrast is so that it separates the midground from the background layer. The key to controlling this high contrast is by placing your lighting at a 45-degree angle. This angle helps to define the shapes and dimensions of your overall image and prevents that flat look that soft lighting produces. Now, these are the external parts of creating depth that all go into the set design. So let's move to the actual equipment that allows me to capture it, such as my lenses. It's important to select the right focal length so you can capture the set as desired. Your lens, whether wide angle or telephoto, determines how much of the set you're going to capture, as well as the amount of compression that's going to be in your photos. So for the shoot, I use 3 lenses. I use my 85mm f1.8, I use my 50mm f1.8, and I use my 24-70 f2.8. I used the 85 for close-ups, I used the 50 for mid-shots, and then I used the 24 to 70 for full body. My primary reason for using these lenses was to shoot open with a wide aperture, which is an in-camera technique that you can use to create depth in your photos. Aperture. Adjusting your aperture is key to pulling focus for your viewer because it controls how much of your scene is in focus. And the easiest way for me to create depth in my photos is by shooting with a wide aperture or a shallow depth of field. Using a low f number between f1.4 and 2.8 helps to keep your subject sharp while blurring the fore and backgrounds. So for my close-up shots, I shot around f1.8, and for my mid and full body shots, I shot up to f4. The slight variations in aperture achieve one goal, which was to pull the focus of my viewer and guide them to my subject. So if you've noticed that within the steps that I've taken so far, we didn't even have to take a photo. The only photo that I took was of the set as it was. Everything that we've done so far required making sure that the set had built-in depth. Second thing is making sure that we have the proper lighting. Third, making sure that my camera settings were at the appropriate aperture so that I can then capture all of the depth that we've created in the actual environment. Since I've taken these steps and I took my first test shots. That's nice, okay.
Right. Yay! We finally got started, guys.
I can now start composing the photos. Good use of depth guides the viewer's eye. Composing images for depth requires a combination of positioning and posing from you, the photographer, and your subject. My positioning was very important to capturing depth. I primarily shot at a low position by crouching low to the ground to make the foreground appear larger and more prominent, which helped in exaggerating the perspective and enhancing the depth. For the most part, Ashley remained in one spot, and I moved around the set to photograph her at various angles. She already knew where she needed to be positioned, which was in the midground. Sometimes you might have to instruct your model to move away from the background to make sure that there's a good degree of separation between the background layer and the midground layer. So Ashley knew where she needed to sit, which was aligned in the center of my shot, and from there, I gave her prompts to pose. Now, there are specific poses that you can instruct and guide your model/client through to pose for depth. My approach in directing posing is to encourage natural movement. Even if my goal is for the clients to pose for depth, I still want movements from them that are natural. Because if the posing is relaxed or feels comfortable to them, it'll come across in the images. Since the full body shots require different posing than the mid and close-ups, she didn't need to employ full body poses yet. Because of this, I told her that most of the poses were going to be done with her hands. So what I did is that I suggested that she put her hands on her face. I didn't tell her how to do it. I just suggested that and allowed her to do what was most natural to her. Now, you might run into the instance where you have clients or models or people that you work with who could be overthinkers and say, like, should I do it this way or should I do it that way? And my suggestion would always be to do what is most natural to you. But I think that by just giving that initial prompt, it gives you, the photographer, a visual, and then you can make adjustments from there. So when it comes to posing for depth, avoid posing your model directly facing the camera. Since for most of the shoot, Ashley would be seated, it was important for her not to sit directly with her feet facing the camera. So you can ask your model or client to turn their body roughly 45 degrees from the camera. This creates more dimension than a flat-on shot. And a case in point of that are the two first photos that I took as test shots where Ashley was directly facing the camera. So you can encourage your model/clients to angle their upper body away from the camera to open their torso, or ask them to lean forward toward the camera, which makes their head and shoulders closer than their waist to the camera. And that adds a level of depth. Lowering the chin and hunching the shoulders can help in adding that dimension too. And what you can also do to break away potentially straight lines or what appears to be straight lines in the body poses is to create shapes or create triangles. Since Ashley was already sitting and posing with her hands, I didn't need to tell her to bend her knees or elbows. But you might ask your clients/models to bend their knees or elbows to create such shapes. You can also move away from those straight lines by asking your clients/models to place one body part over the other, such as allowing the arm to cross over the torso, or have them fold their legs. Now, this was easy for Ashley to do as she was already seated, so we could easily eliminate some of those straight lines by just the fact that she was sitting down for most of the shoot. Now, these are just some of the ideas that you can use to help your client/model pose for depth, but there's one final technique that I like to talk about, and that has everything to do with what you can do as the photographer to create depth in your photos. Framing is a great composition technique for depth, and there's 3 different ways of framing that I've learned to help create depth in my photos. The easiest one that I use is natural framing, which utilizes environmental elements to frame your model. So I easily employed natural framing by centering Ashley and shooting through the flowers to allow them to form a frame around her. I also use foreground framing by positioning myself very close to the flowers so that they sat partially on the edge of the frame, which directed attention to Ashley. So for this shoot, there were specific poses that Ashley wanted to recreate on her Pinterest board. And to recreate this pose, we had to remove all of the set pieces in the foreground layer, such as the floral bridge and the 2 potted plants. And so this allowed me to use a vertical framing, which is a way of getting more vertical depth by allowing the ground to fill the foreground layer and the top of the scene to fill the background layer. And that required me to shoot at a low position to the ground. So when Ashley told me her concept for the shoot, I was excited because not only do I love photographing flower-themed shoots, but it's also because it took me back to when I first started as a photographer, and my primary subjects were, of course, flowers. It was through shooting flowers that I learned how to create depth in my photos. And creating depth doesn't always necessarily require a human subject. Photographing flowers is a practical way for learning depth because it directly translates to more dynamic scenarios with a human subject. Using flowers as a stationary subject teaches you about natural set design, layers, lighting, and composition. And then when you finally add a human subject in between, you end up with this beautifully composed portrait that has depth to it. So in this shoot, that's exactly what we were able to do. But even if you are working on location and your set is not as easily manipulatable, you can still employ these techniques because it's all about guiding the viewer's eye. Remember, good depth is about guiding the viewer's eye. And so if you are able to look at the scene and visualize your foreground, midground, and background, and then on top of that, contemplate what lighting you can use or even the natural lighting there and the direction that you need to use to make sure that your images have those shadows and also that high contrast. And then on top of that, you can incorporate, maybe if you're shooting with a model, posing for depth, or if you're not shooting with the model and have like a stationary subject, then you can use different composition techniques like framing and you can create images with depth. So your photos will still be good.